I don't know who's the host now.
Now
I
I'm the
think
host.
now
Right.
is the-
Before it was hostless. Our recording, everyone. Okay. Willow, we need you to behave this time because otherwise I'm going to have to mute you again. It's painful.
I don't. We don't see you, Rabbi.
No, we
I'm turning
don't.
on my video right now. Hello.
There
Okay.
you go.
Hi. Hi,
All
Rabbi.
set. All set. Okay.
Ah, okay.
Let us begin our study together. Last week we began our study of the mitzvah of tzitzit, and we're going to look at it more this evening. Let me move you guys up on the top of the screen. Good. Okay.
All right.
Let's bring it down. Okay. So we spent some time last week just looking at the introduction to the topic, and then analyze a little bit about where the the meaning of tzitzit is, and what the tchelet was. That's where we spent the second half of our talk looking at the tchelet. So let's pick it up with this question about when is the mitzvah? When is the mitzvah of wearing tzitzit? What would you say? Let's just read the verses again. And
Where is that?
Tell us to make themselves tzitzit. Al kanfei bigdeihem ledorotam, on the corners of their garments throughout the generations. And they should put on the corners of it a strand of techelet. So far, if you had to answer the question, when do you have to do this? You have to, well, firstly, one of the interesting discussions in the Talmud will be, is there an obligation to put fringes on a four-cornered garment just because there exists a four-cornered garment? Meaning, even if it's sitting on your shelf is the discussion. If you own a four-cornered garment, you have to tzitzitize it. That's your obligation. As soon as it's there, the beged, the garment says, put tzitzis on me, even if you're not putting it on. It's a possibility, right? There is such a possibility. Okay, so for example, many people went to Mexico and they got themselves a poncho. Got yourself a poncho. So yeah, Wendy's already smiling. Why?
There's no four corners.
No, there are four corners.
There are four corners.
Yeah, it just sits a certain way. So
Well, I had a
ponchos.
So
You had but presumably a poncho, I'm guessing, I think a standard poncho will be obligated in tzitzis. So like the minute you bought it in Mexico, you'd be obligated maybe, according to one opinion, to put tzitzis on it or something, maybe, could be. Okay, so we happen not to follow that opinion, thankfully. And then Torah goes on, and they shall be for you a tzitzit, as tzitzit, or and you will see them, and you'll remember all the commandments of God, and you'll perform them. So this becomes an interesting, dominating question, which is uri'item oto, and you will see them. So put on your. You are now becoming a Talmudic scholar, and you want to try to unpack from this verse something about the extent of the obligation. So what might you say? Based on this word, and you shall see them, how does that perhaps guide you about when the obligation exists?
It has to be a time of day when you can see.
All right, David said, well, that's already a step two. But you must be able to see them, that the circumstances are such that they are visible to you. That would seem to be what be the factor. And so David correctly says, yeah, that means that if it's a time of day when you cannot see, then you're not obligated to put four corners on your garment. When would that be?
At night.
At night.
At night. So, and it doesn't matter that you happen to light a candle and then you'll be able to see. It's possible that would already make the difference about what the factor will be defined by naturally could you see. So let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch over here. And Willow, can you read this? Can you see this?
Wait. Yeah.
Okay, night.
The Rambam. Anything that
No,
is
above that, night. You see above that.
night is not the time of tzitzit because the obligation is limited by you. Hey, Rabbi.
There's something ironic about that problem, right? By and you shall see it. Right? So, and you shall see it, or itemoto, is a delimiter of this mitzvah. And we learn from this that nighttime is not the time. But this is actually a debate. Go ahead. According to the Rambam. You see that?
According to the Ramban, anything that is worn at night is exempt, even if it is designated for daytime use. And that which is worn in the day is required to have tzitzit, even if it is designated for the nighttime use.
Okay.
According to the Rosh, the garment which is designated for nighttime is exempt even if it is worn in the day, and the garment designated for daytime and nighttime is required to have tzitzit even if it is worn in the night.
So what we're going to put on your Talmudic scholar caps again here. What is the machloket, the disagreement between the Rambam and the Rosh? Anybody offer an explanation for how they disagree, what the essence of the disagreement is? According to the Rambam, anything that's worn at night is exempt, irrespective of how the garment was, what it's kind of generally assigned for. And according to the Rosh, it's any garment of the night is never obligated, and any garment of the day is always obligated. Let's be more specific. What's a garment of the night?
A pajama.
Pajamas. Good. You have pajamas. You have poncho pajamas, four-cornered pajamas. So according to Rambam, if you are in a lockdown for 3 months and you never get dressed anymore, right? Except for maybe getting on the Zoom with Rabbi Barter. It's 2 p.m. and you're still wearing your pajamas. So according to the Rambam, do you have to put tzitzit on your pajamas?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, Rambam
because it is daytime. And as long as it's daytime, wiggle your fingers over your lens. As long as it's daytime during the daytime, any four-corner garment on your body has to have tzitzit. At nighttime, any four-corner garment on your body does not have to have tzitzit. Whereas according to the Rosh, it's all actually dependent on the type of garment that it is. And he would say pajamas never need tzitzit. And, a regular shirt always obligated tzitzit. Even if it's pitch black outside and it's nighttime, you still have to have it because it goes after the beged, the garment versus the time of day. That's a dispute that's there. And there's some discussion about what bracha you should make, and whether you make a bracha that at night. And there's one time of the year. Let's read the Ramah, because it's one time of the year, folks. Tell me what the answer is. When everyone, I have to be careful, because since we understand to be an obligation on men, all the men wear tzitzit at night. When is that?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, correct. Everyone wears a towel on Yom Kippur night. So let's take a look at the Ramah here. When do you want to read this?
And a doubt regarding blessings is ruled leniently, so one shouldn't make a blessing on the mitzvah of wearing tzitzit, unless it is worn in the daytime and it is designated for daytime.
Right, so let's say you're going to be strict about both these opinions. The answer is that, you don't make a bracha unless it's a daytime garment in the daytime. Okay, and after the evening prayers.
And after the evening prayers, even if it is still day, one shouldn't say a blessing on it.
Okay.
And on the night of Yom Kippur, one should put on the garment while it is still day and say the blessing on it.
Now, we happen to have the practice of, right, when do we say Kol Nidre?
Just before dark.
No. Be more specific.
Well, it's still day.
We say we start saying Kol Nidre before candle lighting. Actually, before sunset. before sunset at least. That's partially because of the mitzvah started already accepting Yom Kippur before it's even dark outside. But we try to be careful to say, because Kol Nidre might be something which is dependent on a Beit Din's action and shouldn't happen on Yom Kippur. But that means also all the men who are putting on the Tali Tot are putting them on when it's still halachically daytime, and indeed visually daytime before the sun is set. Okay, there you go. Any questions on that? That was a little excursus into some halacha. All right, so we're gonna go into. Should we do this other piece over here? Rambam. Okay, we're gonna skip that. We'll skip that Rambam over there, right? Okay. Let's see a bit more about this. So when should you do it? I mentioned two things. I mentioned, and I use them interchangeably. What we call generally, hey, are you wearing tzitzis? We use that colloquially to actually refer to what? Are you wearing tzitzis today? What are we referring to?
It's a specific.
Right. It's a specific, Mimi saying, right, the talit katan, not the wrap that you put on, but the other thing that people wear consistently. That we call tzitzis, even though technically the tzitzis is the strings on the corners of the garment. Okay. So let's take a look at this Ibn Ezra teaching here. Hedda, you want to read that for us? And you shall see. Let me highlight it. And you shall see it.
I don't see where you are.
I just highlighted it right now.
Oh. And you shall see it. The mitzvah is that it should be visible.
Okay, so not only is the mitzvah that you should be wearing it at a time when it's visible to see it, according to those opinions, but you have to be wearing it in such a way that it is visible.
Visible to who? To yourself or to others?
Okay, tell me more about how you wear something that's only visible to you.
Well, you're wearing it inside. Some people wore it inside, and some men do wear
I
it
understand. If you're wearing it inside, what does inside mean, Hedda? Tell me what that means, inside.
Well, inside your pants,
Inside your pants, right. So unless you happen to have, special belly button eyeballs, you're not going to... Somebody's got a little problem. All right, I'm going to have to mute everybody. Oh, yeah, I hate to do this. Does anybody know who's making the noise?
Yeah, it was Miriam trying to get on. All I could do is hear you. Don't worry, just keep going. I won't
Okay, that was like another one of those Saturday Night Live routines. Okay, and Mick, are you listening?
Oh, I saw him a minute. Oh, there he is.
Okay, let's get back to this. So, unless you have, special in your clothes eyes, you're not going to see what's tucked into your pants. So that doesn't really work, right? So presumably, if it means it has to be visible to everyone, right? So so how does that work? What does visible to everyone mean? Well, so on the one hand, it means that your tzitzis, at least as Ibn Ezra is saying, right? The fringes should be where?
outside.
Outside. What my grandmother would often disparage and be angry at me for, tzitzis arois, right? Your tzitzis are hanging out, and it's usually that meant you're a slob. That's what she really meant by that. You look like a slob today. But in principle, that's the tzitzis should be out. Yes? And not only that, so now you can look at me. I've chosen, nobody even noticed it yet last week either, but I'm wearing, as I think I mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my woolies. I once bought this pair of woolies. They're very hot. That's why I don't like to wear them. They're made out of wool. So if you go to a Hasidic community, you'll see people wearing the entire garment outside.
You wore it with your tuxedo last night.
I did not have my tzitzis over my tuxedo last night.
No. You had your jacket, and when you walked out with your shorts, you could see your.
Oh, you can see my tzitzis hanging out. You're right. for the copy thing there. Yes, that's true. So, but they wear it outside, not because they are all a bunch of slobs, but because they think that that's part of the mitzvahs. That the mitzvah shouldn't be all tucked in and it's supposed to be visible to you, and primarily because it's about looking at it that you're supposed to have the impact. Okay, let's go a little further in. You were reading, Hedda. Go a little further. The mitzvah
Rabbi Martyr,
is.
may I interrupt that with a question? Yeah. So the question is,
Go.
we seem to jump to the wearing it for the duration of the day, but I may have missed. So, oritomoto alone as a statement. I mean,
Yes.
is there an interpretation that suggests that you only need to view it on a routine basis during prayer?
Perfect. So now I'll let you read. You read. I was going to have you read what I just highlighted. Because you're with me.
Rabbi,
You're perfectly with me in the flow of the thinking. Yes, go ahead. Question.
so if you have to see it, then why is everybody? Why would you put it on the clothes on the inside as opposed to the coat?
Firstly, if you had a coat that had 4 corners, you'd have to put it on your coat too. But and in fact,
But why two? Why two? If you have outer clothes that are showing, if you had outer clothes that showed it, then why do you need anything underneath?
You don't necessarily have to need it underneath, right? But so the Torah says anytime. Let's make sure we have to clarify. This is important. There is no. Oh, well, we skipped the Rambam. Oh, let's go back to the Rambam. Now I realize what I skipped. Here. Actually, Mimi, you read this, and then we'll get to Greg. Could you read this? Even though a person, it's a Rambam. Can you see that?
I just lost it. Yeah. Even though a person is not obligated to purchase a talit and wrap himself in it, so that he must attach tzitzit to it, it is not proper for a person to release himself from this commandment. Instead, he should always try to be wrapped in a garment which requires tzitzit, so that he will fulfill this mitzvah.
So he admits that if you do not own a 4-cornered garment, or you're not wearing a 4-cornered garment, then you do not what?
You don't have to wear it, but
you don't have to
but
put
he's
it
saying,
on, right? The Torah says, right? That's right. On your 4-cornered garment, put on the tzitzit, right? And so,
right.
which we say ones that you're wearing. So if you don't have a 4-cornered garment, then you haven't done a crime by not having tzitzis, because the Torah just says if you have a 4-cornered garment, then put on tzitzis, right? Yet he says, but no, people should. And that's the Gemara, which I'm not looking at with you right now, which describes people who try to evade this mitzvah and by avoiding wearing 4-cornered garments, and that's wrong. It happens that that we don't dress the same way that other eras dressed. Often people who wore you wore a toga. I'm just guessing. A toga was probably a 4-cornered garment, right? It's a giant sheet wrapped around you somehow or another. Am I right? Is it cornered? Does it have corners?
Like a sheet.
It looks like a sheet. The hard part is, right, I only know togas from Animal House and any imitating Animal House when people put on a sheet. Yeah. So I don't know if a real toga had it, but presumably other societies, you just had a 4-cornered garment and you wrap yourself in it. So you put a tzitzit on it, of course. But our general shirts aren't 4-cornered unless you buy one of the, right, generally not. So you could avoid this mitzvah if you wanted to, and the Rambam says that's just wrong. That's just wrong. Now he actually goes a little further. A person should always try to be wrapped in a garment that's obligated mitzvah, so you can fulfill the mitzvah. And then he says, here, we're going to read the Rambam, and then Greg's going to read the Ibn Ezra. And at time of davening, a person should be extra careful. It is a great insult to the sages that they should pray not wearing a tallis. So, by the way, what do we have a practice? It's a very odd practice. The German Jews do not have it, but the other Ashkenazi Jews had a practice regarding single men. Yes, what's the practice?
that they don't wear a talit until they're married.
Single men don't wear talit until they're married, unless they're the chazan. Okay, and anybody know why that's the case?
So they're single.
That was actually one of the explanations, right? that people should know they're single so they could be able to make shidduchim for them.
Right.
Right. So that was fascinating that would be the case. So people, but sometimes, honestly, it's very uncomfortable sometimes if you have someone who's a lifelong bachelor for whatever reason, lifelong bachelor. So some of them, just chose to wear talis anyway because they didn't want to be. Whatever reason, they weren't planning on getting married. Leave me alone. Every time I walk out of shul, somebody comes over and says, "I have a girl for you." So it's put on a talis so people would not bother them. So anyway, fine. So let's take a look at the Ibn Ezra. And Greg, you're our reader of the second part of the Ibn Ezra. Here.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
Okay, can you see it?
You got it. And the mitzvah is that anyone who has a four-cornered garment should wear it always, and not remove it from himself, so that he might remember. And those who pray with a shawl during the time of prayer, they do so because they recite the Shema, the words, and they shall be for you as tzitzit, and they shall make themselves tzitzit. Just
Okay.
that.
So
Go
hold on
ahead.
a second. So he makes a certain point that it would be wrong for a person to daven and say them and describe in their davening the mitzvah of tzitzit.
Not have
Again,
it
we're talking
on.
about someone who's obligated in tzitzit, and not have the tzitzit on them. We do the same thing when it comes to tefillin. And so if somebody gets up in the morning and let's say he wants to make sure that the Shema is recited at the right time in the morning. There's a certain time. This week is around 9:15 in the morning. So and you're getting up and it's kind of late. So he said, I have to say Shema quickly. And the answer is you shouldn't. You should try to get your tefillin on first because it's somehow, it's actually called the following. If you say that God commanded me to wear tefillin, and yet I'm not wearing tefillin right now, even though I'm obligated to do so, so it's as if I give false testimony. That's the rabbinic statement, right? So to describe the mitzvah of wearing tzitzit, and I'm obligated, and yet I'm not wearing them, would be like a bad thing. But then he says, and so now, right? So that's what people do. Men would put on a tallis during prayer time, and that's what they would do. Just that. Go on.
Just that, according to my thinking, there is a greater obligation to wrap oneself in tzitzit in all the rest of the hours of the day than during the hours of prayer. That way, he will not err and he won't transgress at any hour, since during the time of prayer, he won't be doing sins.
Yes, explain that. Unpack that. What's his point?
Sounds like suggesting wear the tali katan for the remainder of the day.
Yes, and why is that?
This is because during prayer, you're not sinning. I mean, I think the counter argument, not to be presumptuous here, would be you can still use that time to, raise your awareness of the mitzvot and
Absolutely.
carry
Right.
it with you. And so, anyway, that's his point. His point is you need the constant visual reminder for the remainder of the day.
Especially in the times when sinning is more probable. And so prayer time sinning is less probable, and non-prayer time sinning is more probable, and so it makes more sense to be careful to wear tzitzit in those non-prayer times. He, of course, presumed that people's prayer time was actually a spiritual experience and not something other than that, which we might be more familiar with ourselves, okay? But that's what he says. Okay, now, how does this mitzvah, how does the reminding happen? I forgot my tea over there. What is the way in which you remember the mitzvahs? So I want us to sort of break this down to 3 or 4 approaches that are here. And let's start with this one over here and invite Rick, if you want to read for us this teaching of the
Torah. The Torah now recalls the mitzvah, which has within it the impact of keeping the mitzvot of the Torah in toto, as it says, and you will see it and recall all of the mitzvot of the Torah. And that emerges from the mitzvah of tzitzit, according to my thinking, in 2 ways. Because clothing is something that is always on a person, and his eyes notice it. And when he sees on his clothing one mitzvah of God, he will remember his maker, and he will fear turning away from following God, not fulfilling God's commandments.
Okay. So what does he say? How does it remind you? How does it remind you of God?
Because it's always present.
Yes. And and you say, why do I have those strings on me? Oh, right, God commanded me to do so.
Yeah, you see it.
So there's nothing intrinsic to the tzitzit. It's just getting something on your garment that will be a reminder to you. And if you could have, if Torah could have equally thought of, you should have a big red insignia on your clothing for that matter, and it would have done the same thing, because you'll say, yeah, I was following God's commandment today. But why? Because otherwise, why would I have this on me? But there's nothing intrinsic. That's what I want you to see. That's the first approach. Just because you have something that you know is there because God told you to put it there, that reminds you of the commandments in general.
But isn't this, yeah, that in general, this is also saying you see the tzitzit, so now you remember all the commandments.
Yes, correct. Yeah. But that's the method. It's simply, I see a mitzvah and I remember other mitzvah. So let's take a look, though, at the next read. Eleanor, can you see this?
Which one?
And you will see it and remember?
See it, remember.
Remember?
Yeah, this is the Bechor Shor, and you will see it and remember. I've highlighted it now. The right-hand side of the page.
And you shall, Zohar? You're doing the Zohar?
Above the Zohar.
And you shall see them and remember?
Yes.
Above that.
And you will see it and remember.
Good.
But it's only there for the purpose remembering. And when he sees this mitzvah, he will remember and pay attention to observe the mitzvah. For the tzitzits are like an imprint on the cloak of servant, a sign that he is indentured to his master. And when Israel see it, they remember that they are indentured to the Holy Blessed One, and it is incumbent upon them to fulfill all of God's commandments.
So, yeah, it's like a branding.
Yeah.
And I mean branding in the old West branding, right? Which is like, okay, I'm part of God's squad, and God's squad. And how do I know that? Because I have the marker of being in God's team here, and that means I keep his commitments because I'm one of God's servants. Okay, go ahead.
Is this paragraph also implying the plural here? Because it begins with the he and his, and then it goes on to Israel, they.
Yeah.
In other words, I see it on you, and I remember.
But no, or collectively, when all those Israelites are out in the streets doing this, you can say, oh, there are God's people out there, right?
Or even one.
So I have to tell you, by the way, in one of those movie sets, somebody, was an extra in some Jewish movie. It might have been Yentl, one of them, or whatever. And they actually had, so they had tzitzis that they simply put on some like on a little. They didn't bother buying tzitzis at a store. They somehow just attached fringes to some, like papered it on, or had some string that went over their shoulders, and they had nothing else but the tzitzis coming out, right? But they knew in the movie that Jews had to have his fringes on, but somehow they couldn't get the whole garment down. On the other hand, I will tell you, in the shul, who was it? Somebody in the shul found out, yes, that's what it was, Moses and Aaron was being performed by the opera, and they went to Zion Tallis for the opera. They bought up a bunch of taluses for some scenes in Moses and Aaron, the opera, and then when the opera was over, they were getting rid of the stock, and so they chopped them all up and they brought them to the shul, and. I remember taking one out one day. The chazan was going to put on a talus, and they had on the corner of his tzitzis, they told you whose part you were, and so he had his corner said his tzitzis, the corner of his talus said Moses on it. I said, "Wow, right, you have Moses' talus." Okay, back to where we were. So here we have the Zohar, and this is going to be a hard one to read his description, but the idea is yet of note to us. So Sam, you want to read this teaching? It's actually not technically the Zohar, but it's a Zoharic tradition. Go ahead.
and you shall see them and remember. And it is written, remember what Amalek did to you. What is the reason for this? Rather, it may be compared to a son who broke through the fence and was bitten by a dog. Whenever the father wishes to rebuke his son, he says to him, remember how the dog bit you.
Well,
Okay.
Here too you shall see them and remember, for that is the place where souls go to be judged. Likewise, and whoever was bitten and saw it and lived, why? Rather when he is...
So I don't know what he's talking about right now, but go on.
Yeah, neither do I. Rather when he is taken for affliction and sees the image of that which bit him, he is fearful and prays before God, and he knows that this is his punishment because of his guilt.
Okay. So far, it's still blurry. Let's go to this next paragraph. So long.
So long as the son sees the whip of his father, he is afraid of his father. Once he is saved from the whip, he is saved from everything. What caused him to be saved? That in his suffering he saw the whip. That whip caused him to be saved.
Hello, this is White Plains Mayor Tom Roach calling with important information regarding...
Oh, the mayor. That's what's calling Sam also. Daniel. Okay. The mayor called. Okay, go on.
And for this it is written, and saw it and lived. He saw the whip with which he was bitten, and it was his salvation. Here too, and you shall see it, and remember and do.
Certainly for that whip caused him to return to his service constantly. I'm
Right.
not interested to all the harshness of the whole imagery he's conjuring up, but how do tzitzit remind you of the commandments of God? Can you see me?
Yes.
Tzitzis look like whips. That's what he says.
We're not seeing you.
Oh, I'll undo it.
Okay.
I'll undo it for a second, right?
We got you.
A tzitzis looks like whips. That's what it is. It's a whip.
No, it looks like kelp.
So his explanation is that you will see them and remember God's commandments because you see the specter of punishment for failure to fulfill God's commandments. And you don't have to do anything else. You just have to see it. Just like if a father would just take off his belt once. Don't make me take this off. Whatever the version of this are that we might have heard people talk about, right? I take off the belt so that that gets you to fall into line. This is very different. The first opinion says, I have a mitzvah of God on me. I remember, or I remember that I'm part of God's team, and therefore I got to do mitzvahs. Okay, now we suddenly have a more frightening imagery of the mitzvah that you remember the mitzvah because you remember the punishment for failure to perform. There's a loftier read, and let's try to go to that now. And that so first thing this is math read. This is the one you find in Rashi. So Alex, you want to read this for us?
Sure.
Thanks.
The tzitzit will remind one of all the commandments because the numerical value of the letters of the word tzitzit is 600, and there are 8 threads and 5 knots in the fringes, so that you have 613, which is also the number of commandments of the Torah.
Wow, you couldn't make this up. It's perfect. Tzadi is 990. 2 tzadis is 180. Kaf is 400. So it's 580. Yud is 10. Yud is 10. 600. So you're down 13. And how do you make up a 13? Oh, that's what we do. There are 8 threads folded over, right? So 4 threads folded over, and 5 knots in the fringes. So that's how they make them up. That's the traditional way to do it. You have 5 sets of knots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. 613. So you'll see them, and you'll remember the commandments of God. Now, of course, did anybody here actually know this drasha until a moment ago? This reading?
Oh, I
Somebody
think
did. Okay. Anybody else is not going to know how to remember the commandments of God because unless you know the gematria, the numerical value, and how it all adds up, you're not going to have this symbol clear to you. But that's what Rashi says. There is a problem because in the Torah, by the way, the word tzitzit is written without a second yud. the first yud, I should say. So they got to make up an extra 30 in here, but that's fine. Okay. Now that dot's a Canaan. Fine. Let's look at the other point. Let's look at the Gemara Menachot, which I think is really the essence of it, and that is because when the Torah says you'll see it and remember the commandments of God, what will you see? What is it that you will see? Make yourself tzitzit, asulahem tzitzit, and then natnu al tzitzit kanaf piltot techelet. Secondly, it says place on the tzitzit of the corner a blue thread, and then it'll be for you as tzitzit uritem oto. Oto. So, how do you translate the word oto? Oh, it's not coming out right. Oto. Anybody?
Them.
So it does not mean them. If it were them, it would be otam, right? With the plural of the mem at the end. Oto means singular,
right?
And it means one of two things. It either means it or him.
Him.
We're going to stay with it for now. And it says, and you will see it singular masculine. What is singular masculine in the verse preceding? Tzitzit is a feminine word. Okay, so that couldn't be tzitzit in general, but the patil techelet, the patil, the thread which is blue, is singular masculine. And if that's the case, when the Torah says, you will have your tzitzit, and you will see it and remember the commandments of God, it is that blue thread. It's the blue thread which is the reminder. Now, again, when we don't have the blue thread, we have to come to all the other explanations as other ways in which we remember the commandments of God. But it seems the essential message is it's the techelet, which is. So let's take a look over here at the Gemara in Menachot. Right? And David, do you want to read this Gemara for us? It is taught in a Braita. Are you with us, David? No. Okay. Who else wants to read? Miriam, how about you?
Okay. It is taught in the Barakat that Rabbi Meir would say, what is the difference about teklit from all other types of colors, such that it was chosen for the mitzvah of ritual fringes? It is because teklat is similar in its color to the sea, and the sea is similar to the sky, and the sky is similar to the throne of glory, as it is stated. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet the like of a paved work of sapphire stone, and the like of the very heaven for clearness, indicating that the sky is like a sapphire brickwork. And it is written, that's all. Oh, that's it.
Likeness.
The likeness of a throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And here is another version of this. Can you read this also? Can you see it, Miriam?
Yeah.
The rabbi said.
And the rabbi said, what does the Torah enjoin us regarding tiklit? Because tiklit resembles sapphire, and the tablets were of sapphire, to tell you that so long as the people of Israel gaze upon this tiklit, they are reminded of that which is inscribed on the tablets, and they fulfill it. And so it is written, and you shall see it and remember.
So the blue thread eventually takes you in your contemplative place all the way up to the sky, and from there to the heavenly throne, and the tablets of stone, which were the tablets of the mitzvot, which were all kind of bound together, and that's how you remember the commandments of God. So when I wear my techelet, which I'm happy to, and I try to make sure, and this is what people do when you say the Shema. When you get to that third, right? You get to that third part, uri'item oto uzachartem, and you'll see it and you'll remember. So you know, even if you're looking at your siddur the rest of the time, or you're looking out the window the rest of the time, you take a few moments and you stare at your tzitzis, And if you're Rashi's explanation, you're counting up the threads and the threads and the numerics and the knots to get to remembering of God. If you were the earlier interpretation, you are thinking about that this is a whip in the Rai Mehemna, or this is God. I'm a member of God's army, another version. And if you are following this approach, if you have the Techelet, you sort of allow yourself to see all the threads and then the blue one, and let your mind take you to another place for a few moments. Right? And not only when you're davening, of course, but at any point of the day. So we're going to, look, it's 8:21, we're going to have to stop here. Let me tell you quickly, so we'll continue our journey for next time. Here's what I want us to do.